I've seen a lot of complaints and requests for assistance with setting up tunnels and tunnel portals correctly. So today I'm going to show you how to do this with a variety of tunnels in a number of different situations. So let's get into it. What I'm going to cover today is about tunnels. I'll start by showing you in the background the typical topography that requires tunnels. Then I'll show you 9 or 10 examples of tunnels, which covers most of the types available, from the over 250 built-in tunnels in my version of TRS 2019 and more than 1500 available from the download station. Then I'll install several tunnels, showing the many different ways there are to install a tunnel portal and track through the mountain. Bear in mind every tunnel is different. From a point of view of how to install it, it could be the length, the grade involved, the sharpness of the curve, the height of the hill, the angle of the embankment behind or beside the tunnel, just to mention a few of the considerations necessary. My experience shows that being creative each time you plan a tunnel gives you the best results possible, rather than following one procedure. I'll also cover dig holes, concrete slabs used under the tunnel where necessary, using trees and other objects like rocks to hide minor issues, and I'll cover the main techniques to make tunnel installation easier. I'll start with one of the most popular tunnels being used extensively by jointed rail in routes like Coal Country and Eagle River, which is Indigo Tunnel. It's a fairly simple portal, textures with realistic concrete and interior with well done weathering, attached to a distinctive tunnel track that can easily be shaped to any configuration. The main issue is that the tunnel portal is only just wide enough to cover the dig hole it's used to cut a section from the landscape, and it often needs extra objects to cover the empty dig hole area. I'll demonstrate this one first up. It's also the one featured at the start of this video. The second tunnel is similar to the Indigo, but has a longer portal that does block stray light a bit better. Not quite as well textured and with no texturing internally, just dark grey, but it's okay. The third tunnel, aptly named Old Stone Tunnel, is an older model and double track. The texturing is from Trains 12, and it's also one of a series that has built-in curve track, which I often find hard to position if one really doesn't want a curve in the tunnel. Best used where the tunnel portal comes back above ground at a different angle at each end. The fourth tunnel is a similar configuration to the last one, with a built-in curve at each portal and fairly low resolution textures. It does, however, have a larger profile, which makes hiding the dig hole easier. The fifth tunnel is a smaller size tunnel better suited to European routes that do not have overhead wires. While it has a tunnel included, it does not come with track. This tunnel is the first with no tunnel or track included, but comes with a large scenery component to help hide the dig hole and fit into a variety of scenery shapes. There are some 15 of these from 1 to 16, which will fit on the end of a tunnel track and sold separately. The textures vary in style, and when originally developed were considered good textures. However, with the advent of advanced textures in TRS 2019, some of the portals have the issue of a green cast on the scenery, much as the wheel flange does on some older rolling stock, making it hard to match to the original scenery textures. It does, however, have the advantage of using any number of tunnel tracks available. This tunnel is much the same as the third tunnel portal, and it's also double track, but with a single opening to cater to the double tracks. This is the second last tunnel discussed, and like others has a built-in curve on each portal track, with a square entry and a large profile making it easy to cover the dig hole when installed, with textures that look better than expected when put into a scenery position, but I'm not a fan of the look myself. And the twin sister, the last tunnel, is much the same, but it's a double track version, making it the same as its single track version. So I'll start, as I said earlier, with the Indigo Tunnel. And while I said it was probably one of the most popular tunnels, it is not necessarily the easiest to install, mainly because even the smallest dig hole is 1 square grid, and the Indigo Tunnel portal is too small to cover what will normally be cut out of the scenery. So here's a hillside we'll use. First step is to choose our tunnel and place each portal at a starting point either side of the mountain, or hill if you prefer. You'll notice now we have the 2 portals in more or less the correct position. but you'll see the track is running over the contour of the hill. And depending on the tunnel type, I need to get that track under the mountain without creating a cutting, and several tunnel types have several solutions. Luckily, the Indigo tunnel is one of the most simple. All we need to do, using a track height tool, is get the height at one end, and then use the Apply Vertex height tool to the other end. And hey presto, it's done. I'll remove the ground texture so you can see what the track looks like underneath. I'm not going to, but I could easily, if you wanted, apply a simple curve on the tunnel by adding a spline point, but I won't. And moving it to whatever curve you want, as in this case, so set your height at that point accordingly. Mind you, there's a lot to do to get it exactly right. For simplicity's sake, I'm assuming that height of each end of the tunnel is the same. It certainly doesn't have to be so for that preceding step. Now I need to manually move the portal as close as possible to the correct position on the hill. Until I apply the dig hole, it won't be absolutely correct, but close enough to get started. Now, to make our ultimate job easier, I want to add a short length of track to each end of the tunnel portal to allow final adjustments later. Just to confirm the flexibility that is possible with this tunnel, I'm going to add two different type tracks, one procedural with PBR textures and one procedural with no PBR textures. As you'll notice, when I applied this PBR-based procedural track, we immediately got a texture problem, which I discussed in my previous video, so I'll fix it shortly by adding a PBR grass texture around the track. At the other end, I'm laying a non-PBR procedural track, and because I've used non-PBR textures on the hill, there is no texture clash. Now let's quickly fix that texture problem at the other end of the tunnel. My next job is to dig the hole in the side of the hill at each end so we can see right through the tunnel. You'll notice in this image where the ground textures have been taken away, the track is not quite following the parallel lines of the grid. If you did follow the parallel lines, quite often you can get the Indigo tunnel to cover the dig hole without further effort. But in many cases that's not what happens, so I thought I'd better show you an example where I do have to fiddle a bit to cover the dig hole. Here is where the problem comes up with the Indigo tunnel. If I'd used one of the wider and larger format portals, this would not be a problem, but I'll demonstrate that a little later. In this case, I'm going to assume the track position is not critical. I don't need to have a specific or precise location, but sometimes this is not the case, and that does create serious problems. It could be because of a building or a set of buildings or a major road located right next to the track, and moving it even a few metres or yards may cause insurmountable issues. But for this example, I'm going to move the portal. That's probably close enough, at least until we get to the next step. I'll straighten the track outside the tunnel and move to the other end. Now I have applied the dig hole and we have virtually the same problem. This problem does not always occur, as I mentioned earlier, if you position your portal inside a parallel single grid. Then these next few steps would not be necessary. But I didn't do that, so we have got the problem to solve. And then I'll use my favourite solution, a suitable sized concrete slab under the track and the portal to get rid of that gap underneath. And this is usually fairly straightforward to get done correctly. But there's a big but here. We have a large gap on one side and a smaller one on the other side. There are several solutions. I could get a large granite boulder or a very dense small tree, but in this case I'm going to try a concrete tunnel wing. But I have got to move the portal even closer to the mountain to remove the gap at the back. And it is a small gap on the other side. I'll put a tunnel wing there too. You'll note I had some difficulty positioning it, mainly because I viewed it from the wrong angle. So I lifted my view higher up, and it made it somewhat easier. Even so, to be safe, I'm now going to add a few small shrubs to help camouflage any gap that may remain. Later on one of the other portals, I'll show you the granite rock approach as well. You'll notice now that in moving a portal around, I've created a slight curve in the tunnel track, which is not my original intention. And I suspect one of the external tracks is also not quite the right height, as this seems to have forced a slight upward grade from both ends of the tunnel. So I'll move the external track around so they're approximately the same height as the exit point from the portal, and relatively straight. Now all I need to do is the same sort of exercise at the other end, but I won't bore you with the repeat exercise, as what is on the first end is exactly the same process. So this tunnel is now virtually finished, at least for this tutorial purposes. Now, this is our second tunnel with this tutorial, and it's a little different than the last one we just did. It's a much larger format portal, it's a double track portal, and as you'll see, it doesn't need a separate dig hole function. Now I'll be placing this one across a grid rather than parallel, and at an angle through the mountain as well. It is about 1/3 the way up the height of the mountain, so that when the track comes out, the exit track will be on an embankment. Alright, I have the tunnel selected, and because it comes with the track, all I have to do is place the first portal where I want it on the mountain side and add it. Then move to the other side of the mountain and do the same. Because I've added these halfway up the side of the mountain, there's no guarantee that they're on the same height both sides. Assuming I want both portals at the same level for this exercise, I need to use the height tool to measure the height for the first portal and then apply that to the second portal. This is not mandatory, by the way, but if you don't do it, you need to check the grade between the two portals to ensure that it is an appropriate grade. The second portal has now been buried in the mountainside a little bit. Going back to the first portal, I'll add the tracks. This will help us in a minute or so to have the portal correctly positioned into the mountain. And for simplicity's sake, I'll use the track height tool to make sure where the track ends is the same height as the portal. Once again, I'll say you don't need to do that. Then, using the spline height tool, I'll create an initial embankment for the tracks. Because I've used procedural track, which has a PBR texture in it, I'll also need to apply PBR textures on the embankment to have the track fully visible. Here is the view of the tunnel completed in TRS-19 Surveyor. You'll notice at no time did I have to do a dig hole for this portal. And the second view is of the other portal in TRS-2019 Driver, a much simpler process than the popular Indigo tunnel that we did as part of our first example. Now, moving on to our final example. The tunnel seen in this part of the video is one of my least favourite tunnel portals. The concept's very good in that it includes a scenery segment to supposedly make it easy to join it seamlessly into the scenery. The biggest problem, unless you have a desert scene, is finding scenery that matches this colour. So I created a track scene to show where you could use one of these tunnels. It has a basic cutting ending up the tunnel entry, and at the same time I have demonstrated using the granite boulders, as I promised earlier, to try and merge the portal into the scenery a bit more effective. I also added a variety of textures, trees, shrubs and grasses. As I think I have probably covered the basics of how to install portals, I'm not going to show that this time, just the end result. And I should mention that the amount of work necessary to merge this is probably more than a combination of all the time I spent on the other two portals. This scene just shows you how the tunnel is integrated into the scene and is followed by a short cinematic to finish this tutorial off. Let me know in the comments what you think of this third tunnel. Successful or not? In summary, I have shown you a variety of tunnels from the hundreds of those available installed or on the download station, and most of the tricks that may be required depending on which tunnel you choose. I hope this equips you to try a tunnel on your next route development or enhancement. And if you'd like to see more videos the same as this one or the preview you've just seen, please use the subscribe button below this video. And don't forget to click that bell, which guarantees you'll get that notification when every new video is uploaded. I hope you found this tutorial enjoyable and of benefit. If you have any thoughts to share, please add a comment below the video. I always check the comments and appreciate every one of them. But now, that's it from me. Hooroo!